We head back to the men's side of things now. It's Big Ten week. Penn State, the champions from a year ago. They're the favorite once again at the top team in the U.S. lacrosse poll and number 2 in the inside lacrosse poll. Here's how things ended up a year ago. Penn State didn't lose a conference game. Maryland and Hopkins each at 3-2. Rutgers made it into the Big Ten tournament at 2-3. Ohio State and Michigan bringing up the bottom. Penn State beating Hopkins 18-17 in an epic overtime championship game. All right, so let's bring in Chris Marshall to really set the tone of Big Ten weeks. Who better than Chris? Chris, who can stop or jump over Penn State this year?
I see. That's a great question. I think you're looking at this league as kind of a 3-horse league. I mean, I think Hopkins is right now right there on the edge. I think they're going to need to do some work to make sure that they're a tournament team again this season. But of the teams that are in the mix, I think Ohio State is the team I like the most. I mean, I think they've got potential to be a Final Four team. I really like the way they're constructed. I don't think you can overlook adding Dylan Sheridan to the staff. I have a lot of faith in Coach Myers, but I think Coach Sheridan is going to be one of those next young coaches to take the leap and be at the helm of a big-time program. So I think adding another head to an already excellent coaching staff is going to be something that can help them get over the hump. Also, they've got a really strong team. And I think they won some tight games last season. They weren't great in conference, but they've got some guys who can really play. Trey LeClaire, obviously Inacio at the faceoff X. DeBerry is another guy, Amari DeBerry, who's extremely athletic. I'm looking for him to go both ways, but I think he can be a real threat on the offensive side, like we saw Nakay Montgomery for Duke be last season. I think he's got that kind of ability. And Tarafanko, I think, might be the best short stick D-mid in the country, and I'm expecting him to maybe take on a bigger role on the offense as well. So I think this is a team that's a real grinded-out kind of team that gets wins in May. And I think if any team's going to be able to slow down Penn State, it's going to be Ohio State.
Interesting for sure. That's a good site. We're going to talk about them a little bit later in the program. So thanks, Chris. How about Maryland? I mean, they're what? A missed blown call away from championship weekend last year. I mean, yeah. They've got some of their guys back. I mean, like you didn't mention them. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
I mean, they're one of the 3 teams that I think is in the mix to win the conference. Okay. I mean, you could see, the Big Ten with 3 teams in the Final Four this season. I mean, I think that's how deep they are, especially in that top half. Maryland's obviously really good. I think the only question mark for them is what they're going to be doing at the goalie position. It's going to be a new guy between the pipes. They had a transfer coming in from Georgetown as well, but I think that's going to be the one question. I mean, I think if that's the toughest question you have to answer for Coach Tillman, I think it's going to be fine. I mean, they've been churning out great goalies year after year, championship goalies at the professional level. So I mean, I think you don't really have to worry too much about it. I mean, there isn't really an alpha that I see sort of on their close defense like we've seen in the past. But if I know anything about Coach Tillman, he'll be able to coach up the defense. But you mentioned bringing back a ton of those guys. I mean, you look at, Wisnowski, Stamayo, Bernhardt, Bubba Fairman. I mean, this team is loaded. They're bringing back their top 4 scorers. Shockey is great at the face-off X. Had a bit of a two-headed beast the last couple seasons, but I think he'll be taken over as the number 1. So I think you look at this team, they're going to be able to control possession. They're absolutely going to be able to run with anyone. They've got one of the most athletic offensive lines in the sport. And I think when you look at Bernhardt specifically, he might be the best athlete in collegiate lacrosse. So I think when you look at what they bring back offensively, they're not going to have any trouble scoring goals. And the interesting thing to point out is if you're looking at the preseason All-Americans, only 2 defensive players on the list, first, second, or third team from the Big Ten. So certainly a conference that we're used to seeing some really high-level defensive talent, and not the depth, at least according to the media polls, that we've seen in the past. So I think there's going to be an awful lot of goals scored, and that's why I'm looking forward to seeing the offensive prowess of this Penn State team. And it's fair to say that both those players were on Penn State, going against some of the better defensive minds, like Coach Petramala, like Coach Tillman, and of course Coach Myers over at Ohio State.
You mentioned Coach Petro. I mean, it feels like a lot of competition as the Big Ten seems to get better and better as the years have gone on here the last few years. For him, I spoke to him a month ago. He's like, yeah, we sort of felt like almost back to the drawing board sort of feel of just trying to fix some of these details. I mean, Joey Epstein had a great freshman year. Yep. It feels like they're going to lean on him quite a bit too, once again this year, right?
Well, I mean, as Epstein goes, go the Jays. And, right now he's out with an injury. I mean, so hopefully he'll be able to come back. Obviously, you never want to see anybody miss any time. But, I mean, you have to wonder, how they're going to play that, if he's going to be able to come back straight away at the beginning of the season. They're coming up here in the first week of February when they're starting their season off. So it'll be interesting to see how they play that. I mean, I think you'd be better off holding him out a little bit if he's not quite back up to 100%. Obviously, I trust the coaching staff, the medical staff over there at Johns Hopkins. But, I mean, you want to make sure that he's ready to go and that he doesn't further injure himself later on the season where you lose time. Because, I mean, he's the key. I don't think that they're going to have the kind of successful season that you expect to see for Johns Hopkins without him in the lineup. So they need to do everything they can to make sure that he's good to go. I
mean, we found out from Inside Lacrosse's reporting that Grant Amen, also a guy that had another surgery here in the fall, which to me, it feels like, they're saying it's not a huge deal, but it's something that's cropped up for him now a couple times. And talking to Jeff Tambroni, he said, well, I don't know if we can expect Amen to do what he did last year, 126 points. I mean, not that he couldn't, but that injury, does it worry you at all? Does maybe his impact on the offense change a little bit, and is that a good or a bad thing?
Well, I mean, I don't think his impact can change for the offense. I mean, the ball goes through him every time. He had 126 points. He had almost 100 assists. So, I mean, he's the guy that's opening the door for everyone else, for the Mac O'Keefes, of the world. So I think that he's still got to be the guy who's the primary ball carrier. That's the way their offense works. But I think anytime you talk about Grant Amen, injuries have to be a concern. Obviously, he lost the whole 2018 season. He only missed one game last season against Cleveland State, which wasn't a particularly big one on the schedule. So, I mean, obviously, it's precautions keeping him out. But, I mean, he's a guy that you worry about a little bit just in terms of his history with the injury bug. So obviously you want to see him out there playing at his highest level, but I think you take the same route that you expect Hopkins to take with Epstein. I mean, you got to make sure that he's good to go because you're going to need him in May, and I think they've got enough talent to keep them afloat, even if he has to miss a couple of games on the front end of the season. But you absolutely need to have him at the end firing on all cylinders. But they've got tons of talent. Obviously, Arceri at the faceoff X is going to make things a little easier on them, even if they have to be without Ament. And you've got guys that can play. Knies is another great backstop for them. So this is a team that's the deepest team in the conference. They're one of the most well-rounded teams, I think, behind maybe only Virginia, just in my estimation, based on what they're bringing back this season. So I mean, I think they're going to be all right, but I'm obviously a little bit concerned with Ament based on the fact that he's had some injury history over the last couple of seasons.
I also don't think they're going to sneak up on anybody this year. Not that they really did last year after all the goals they scored in the first couple of weeks, but everyone's like, oh, Penn State, they can score the ball. I think that might have a little bit of a different mentality, maybe on both sides this season, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Ament is the best player in the country. And so I think when you look at him, he's not sneaking up on anybody. And frankly, everyone knew who he was last season, and they couldn't do anything to stop him. He was 7.5 per, which is outrageous. So, I mean, this is the most prolific scoring duo since Lyle and Miles. And so this is a team that you want to see out there healthy. And with O'Keefe and with Ament playing, I mean, I think, like I said, they're one of the greatest scoring tandems in the history of the sport.
And I can't wait until it starts this weekend. It's going to be great for at least some of the teams. Chris, thank you for the time. We appreciate it.
Anytime.